Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
Hey guys, I just launched my new book, The Dating Playbook for Men, a proven 7-step system to go from single to the woman of your dreams on Amazon now. It's currently ranked number 3 in the relationships category on Amazon. Inside this action-packed book, you'll learn how to deepen your masculine polarity to unleash the man within, how to build an awesome social life that women want to be around, how to understand what women want and desire, how to go out and meet women to build a mindset of abundance, how to go from getting her phone number to effortlessly setting up the first date, how to have a perfect first, second, and third date, and how to have happy and loving relationships and be the grounded man that she so badly wants. You can get the book now at knowledgeformen.com/playbook. Or simply go to Amazon and search Dating Playbook for Men. You're going to like what you see. I guarantee it. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Michael Taylor. He is the author of A New Conversation with Men, and he's also a men's coach. Michael, happy to have you here on the show.
Really great to be here with you, Andrew. I've seen some of your stuff online and really inspired by what you're doing, so I'm glad that we can share this information with each other.
All right. Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, in similar space here, so it's always good to connect with other like-minded men like yourself. As you know, we're going to start off the show with a favorite success quote of the guest, some sort of saying that you've lived by, so share with us what you got.
Well, my favorite is, I will do today what others won't, so I can do tomorrow what others can't. And I live by that because I think the overwhelming majority of people will settle for mediocrity. I choose to live a life of excellence, so I make sure that I work really hard in everything that I do. And I use that quote to keep me motivated, because when things are really tough and you're feeling all alone and you recognize that all the energy and effort you're putting into this stuff is going to pay off long term. So I know that I'm making temporary sacrifices for long-term gain.
Yeah. And it's like separating yourself from the status quo, because the status quo is always just going to do the average type of work, right? It's going to put in the average amount of effort and energy each day. But when you're willing to do what others won't do, I agree with this. When you're doing above the status quo, you get above average results. I mean, do you have any examples of this in your own life?
Well, but first of all, that really applies to men's work, because there are still a lot of men that aren't willing to jump into doing men's work. And when I think about the last 20 years in which I've been writing and speaking about transforming men's lives, there is still a lot of resistance for men to jump in and say, you know what, I want to really look at some of my beliefs about what it means to be a man and maybe change those beliefs. And so when I'm thinking about that quote, I realize that there are men out there who are ready, but there are lots of men who aren't. And my job is to reach the ones who are and let them know what's really possible.
Yeah. What do you think separates the men that are ready versus the men that aren't ready?
Well, there are really only two things that'll cause a man to change. Number one is pain.
Yeah.
Number two is what I call divine discontent. And that is simply a feeling inside that we know that something's just off, something's wrong. We may have all the external things, but inside there's something missing. I would say that 90% of the men fall in the category of pain before they will decide to change. And so what I try to do is give men some tools to help them deal with themselves once they get to that point that they're ready to change. And unfortunately, the pain has gotten too great.
Yeah. And so it sounds like you've been doing this quite a while, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's good. That's good. It's been doing this work for a while. So you've seen a lot of transition and over time. Well, before we dive into some of the work that you do and also the book, A New Conversation with Men, which I'm really enjoying just going through that now, actually looking at it now. And I'm interested too in what led you down this path. What was your life like? What was the aha moment? What was the tipping point for you to get into what you call men's work?
Sure. Well, again, it was pain that challenged me. And, I had lived the so-called American dream. I had the house, the wife, the 2.5 kids, and by society standards, I was pretty successful. Yeah. And then I went through a divorce, bankruptcy, foreclosure, deep state of depression where I even contemplated taking my own life. So I experienced massive amounts of pain. And that pain was my wake-up call, because it really challenged me for the first time to stop looking outside of myself for validation, to meet other people's approval. I really had to stop and start asking myself some deeper questions. And I had an incident that really transformed my life. And this is what happened. During the darkest period of my life, I was sitting up late one night because I was so depressed and I couldn't sleep. And as I was sitting there on the edge of my bed, I looked across my room, and I had this huge bookshelf in my room, and I noticed that all of the books on that bookshelf had something to do with making money. And as I was sitting there looking at those books, this question just popped in my head. And the question was this: Michael, what if you took the same energy and effort you've used in trying to get rich and simply learn how to be happy? That one question literally changed my life in an instant. There was something in me that just clicked, and I realized that I had to go in a different direction in my life. So I stopped reading books on how to make money and how to get rich, and I jumped into psychology and philosophy and spirituality and metaphysics. And all of a sudden, my life began to change. And so as I went through this process of discovering who Michael Taylor really was, who Michael Taylor really is, I recognized that I couldn't have been the only man that had gone through the stuff that I had gone through. So I wanted to kind of reach back and support other men in dealing with the challenges that I'm sure that they were facing. And so that was in 1995, actually, when I first started writing. And so since then, I've been writing books, hosting a radio show. I've done a cable television show in Houston, Texas called The New Conversation with Men. I still have an online radio show called The New Conversation with Men, in which I share the information that I've learned over my 20-year journey to support other men in discovering who they really are and help creating a new paradigm of masculinity on the planet.
Yeah, I like it. And it's an interesting story there, looking at your bookshelf. Or like right now, everyone listening, think about your bookshelf. And I'm looking at mine right now. It's very diversified, but I'm wondering why do you think your bookshelf was full of money, and so many others probably?
Well, again, if you look at masculine culture, as men, for most of us, we have received our validation by the stuff that we can accumulate. For so many of us, it's our identities. How much money we have in the bank, what size house we have, what kind of car we drive. All these external things for a very long time men have used to validate themselves. And unfortunately, too many of us as men, we get caught in this trap that the more stuff we have, the more successful we are. Well, see, I bought into that hook, line, and sinker. I thought that's what it meant to be a man. To have the house, to have the wife, to have the cars, to have the vacation. I bought into all of that. But as I mentioned, it was the pain that challenged me to go a little deeper and to recognize that it's not the external things that will ever make us happy. It isn't until we do the inner work, discover who we are, develop a sense of self, that we can truly be happy and fulfilled. And that's where I believe men are starting to wake up to. I think men are tired, they're frustrated, they're angry, they're confused because the old paradigm of masculinity is crumbling right now. And I'm really optimistic about it, actually, because I think we're reaching that critical mass where more and more men are starting to say, you know what, there is a better way to live. And I can be more fulfilled. I can create more fulfilling relationships. I can create careers that I'm really passionate about. I read somewhere that 76% of the people in America aren't happy with their jobs. Why is that? Because we're taught that we're supposed to go out and find a job that makes the most money versus the job that fulfills our heart and soul. So I think men are really getting tired, and they're starting to wake up. And that's, once again, one of the reasons why I'm so excited to be on your show with you, because you're now giving men some information that I believe supports them in asking some deeper questions that helps them connect to who they really are, which ultimately will help them live more rewarding and fulfilling lives.
Absolutely. You said 76% of men are unhappy in their jobs, and I'm thinking it's got to be more than that. I'm thinking it's definitely got to be in the 90s. Well, let's dive into your book. I want to touch on the 5 illusions of manhood. Let's go there.
Great stuff, because this, to me, if for every man that will listen to this show, if you will grasp these illusions and then shine a little light on them and become aware of them, I can promise you that your life will change significantly. So let's start with number 1. The first illusion is that to be a man, you must be non-emotional and disconnected. And so this is something that has been perpetuated throughout our society for hundreds and hundreds of years. Men are taught that we aren't supposed to feel. We have been conditioned to believe that feelings are for women. And so, unfortunately, a lot of men begin to repress and suppress their emotions, and then they wonder why they're so unhappy. Well, I can say from experience that for the majority of my adult life, that was something that I did. I repressed and suppressed how I felt. And there were some other things that contributed to that, which was a very traumatic childhood experience and some other things. But for the most part, I think as men, we just aren't comfortable with our emotional selves because society has said feelings are for females. Women are emotional. Women are intuitive. Well, I say that now men are beginning to wake up to recognize the fact, or the truth, is that men are just as emotional as women. There is absolutely no difference in how we process emotions and how we feel. The problem is our culture, our society has made it not okay for us to do so. And so when men get courageous and get honest and say, you know what, I'm going to do my inner work and connect with my emotions, then what they find out is, oh, this is where the real juice is, man. It's not about the stuff. It's about being connected to who I am. It's about being able to feel everything and express those feelings authentically. And men are really challenged by that because, once again, our culture has conditioned men that it's not okay. I mean, if you look at, I remember a couple of years ago when the Dallas Cowboys, I'm a big sports nut, and the Dallas Cowboys was playing and something happened. Tony Romo did something and Terrell Owens was defending Tony Romo about something that happened, and Terrence Owens started crying on television. And the sports world went ballistic. Oh, he's such a punk. Oh, he's such a sissy. Oh, because in our culture as men, that's not okay. And Terrell Owens was simply saying how much he cared about his friend and teammate. So the question becomes, why is it as men that it's not okay to express emotions? Well, it's because we've bought into this illusion that to be a man, you must be non-emotional and disconnected. The problem is when we buy into that illusion, it makes it difficult, if not impossible, to create healthy relationships. Because in order to be relational, you must be emotional. And that's a challenge for a lot of men.
This is good. This is a great start here. And I agree. Men believe that we have to be non-emotional, and that is affecting our relationships with both men and women. And so I believe why men don't want to do this is because when they do this, it's their fear of coming across as weak, when as men, we want to be strong and dominant. I don't think that this is necessarily right, but this is just my point on why I think it is that way, or society's point of view.
Right. And when you ask why that is, you're talking hundreds of years of male conditioning.
Yeah.
And so what we're talking about in the quote unquote men's movement is the fact that as men, it is absolutely okay for you to express your emotions. But the question is, are you going to be courageous enough to go against the status quo and to do so?
Yes.
Most men aren't willing to go there. That's just unfortunately the way it is right now. But once again, when I see people like yourself that are having these types of conversations and putting this information out there, once again, I think men are waking up to this new possibility. And I believe that the male culture is changing for the better.
Absolutely.
I really believe that. Number 2, the second illusion is to be a man, you must use sexual conquest as a gauge for manhood. Now, once again, this is something that has been perpetuated through our media for a very long time because men, generally speaking, we've been taught that the more women we can sleep with, the more we validate our masculinity. And so you've got a lot of men out there that are trapped in this illusion, thinking that the more women they can sleep with, the more they validate who they are. That's an illusion that we need to break up. Illusion number 3 is to be a man that you must have money and material possessions. Now, let me say that there's absolutely nothing wrong with having money and material possessions. Nothing. Nothing wrong with having big houses, big cars, and all that. The question is, do you have all those things at the expense of your soul? And unfortunately, too many men get trapped in that they have to have material possessions to be a man, which it takes nothing to be a man but the acknowledgement that you are one. And illusion number 4 is to be a man, you must have titles, positions, and power. You see, we live in a culture that promotes this idea that if you have a PhD, you're a better man than someone with a GED. And I don't believe that's true. You may be better educated, but it doesn't make you a better man. But unfortunately, a lot of men buy into this idea that they have to have titles and labels to be a man, which isn't true. And last but not least, illusion number 5 is that to be a man, we must constantly compete with and try to outdo other men.
Yeah. Going back to number 2, to be a man, you must use sexual conquest to perpetuate your manhood. Mm-hmm. I know that when I first started going into this space and was helping and coaching other men, I found it was challenging in the beginning for me to relate with someone who was a virgin and they were in their late 20s or 30s, perhaps, and to tell them that they were good, that they're enough, and that they just couldn't acknowledge that they were a man without having that. And so they were desperately working on that. And so that was like, well, like, how do I, this was something new for me. I haven't seen this, and I wanted to support this man. So for a man who is struggling sexually with women or in dating, he's got to look at this from a different, it's not that he wants to sexually conquest, but that he just feels like he's not a man because he's unable to attract the opposite sex.
Well, again, I think first and foremost, we have to take the sexual piece out of the equation in terms of validating yourself as a man. If you're a virgin, so be it. That doesn't take anything away from you as a man. You see, our culture says that that's how we get our validation, by sleeping with women. But the point here is that you shouldn't use that as a measuring stick of your masculinity. You should be able to be comfortable. If you have chosen, for example, let's say you've just simply chosen not to have sex by choice, you're just choosing not to, then you shouldn't feel bad about that. You shouldn't feel like there's something wrong with you. Because for men that get caught up in this trap of physical sex and pleasure, then what happens is we lose the most important aspect of what sex, I believe, was designed for. Sex, in my opinion, was designed for connection. Don't put any religious dogma or doctrine around it, but I believe that sex is simply a way that two people are supposed to connect when they really care about each other. It's not something that's designed to go out and validate your masculinity or to say that you're a man, but that's what happens. Men get caught in this trap that, oh, I'm supposed to have sex, and if I don't, there's something wrong with me. Well, if you don't, there's nothing wrong with you. If you're struggling with trying to attract a female into your life to create a relationship with, to have sex, that's actually a separate issue. Being open and honest enough to say, I want to create a relationship in which I find somebody that I really care about, that I could ultimately make love to, there's a whole new conversation. So men have to be willing to do their work to understand what's the driving force behind their need for sex, if there is one, versus simply making a commitment that I want to find someone that I can share my life with, that I can share this intimate aspect of my life with called sex.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. I just wanted to bring that up for someone who might be struggling in their dating life and they do feel like they're not a man because they're unable or struggling to even connect with another woman if it's that. So thanks for making that more clear. And on to number 3 with money and material possessions. Mm-hmm. I definitely think that this is something that a lot of men will spend, most of, if not sometimes in many cases, their entire lives chasing.
Stuff.
Yeah, stuff.
That's the simplest way to put it. We chase stuff, and we think that by accumulating more stuff, we're going to be happy. We think that by accumulating more stuff, it's going to somehow validate us. But look at how many people that you've seen throughout society, and let's just point at celebrities because they're visual. Celebrities that make millions and millions of dollars, and they have all the stuff that you can imagine, and yet their life is in total chaos.
Yeah.
They're absolutely unhappy. They have all the stuff. I think it was Jim Carrey, the comedian, that said something so powerful. He says, I wish everybody could get rich and have everything, because then they realize that that's not it.
Yeah, it's a commencement speech that I highly recommend everyone listen to.
Yeah, he said that they realize that that's not it. And for men, what we have to recognize is it's not about the stuff. Now, at the same time, it doesn't mean that you can't be ambitious and dream of making billions of dollars. That's absolutely fine. But the problem is when we're doing these things to try to feel good about ourselves, that means something's missing inside. And we have to figure out what that is that's missing first. Because no matter how much stuff we accumulate, if there's something missing inside, then there will be a big hole in our souls, no matter what we accomplish.
Right. And on that point, I feel that like the whole money and material possessions thing, another way to view this could be that if someone has a lot of money, like great, that's great. But to me, I respect him not for the money that he has, but for the work and skills and the willpower and the grit and the perseverance that man had to undergo to achieve those things. So I'm not really I'm not like, nice car, that's awesome, but more so like he earned it and he worked hard for it. I view that in a way as he's capable of going after what he wants in life.
Well, but see, that's just healthy ambition. Ambition is a healthy thing, and there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I want to set goals for myself. I want to work hard to make this happen. I want to create this company. I'm an entrepreneur. That's in my blood. I want to do these things. That's wonderful. There's nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, too many men are trapped in this idea that it takes stuff to be validated. And here's a way to sort of validate it all. Who would you be without your stuff? What happened if you lost all your stuff? You didn't have any stuff. How would you feel? Now, it took me losing all of my stuff before I could come to the realization that ultimately I didn't need any stuff to truly be happy. Now, it took a lot of work to get to this point where I can say that I don't need stuff to be happy. I could be absolutely broke. I could be working at McDonald's, and I can promise you I could be happy. Because I took the time to address the core issues that was driving my behavior. I've healed the wounds of my past. I've done the work. I now feel whole and complete as a human being. Therefore, I don't need anything outside of me to be happy, to feel validated. And that's a stretch for most men.
Yeah. I mean, for most people in general.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
That's a stretch for most people, right?
Yeah.
So we've gone over the 5 illusions of manhood and really good points. And just to recap, number 1, to be a man, you must be non-emotional and disconnected. And number 2, to be a man, you must use sexual conquest to perpetuate your manhood. Number 3 is on money, material possessions to validate yourself. Number 4 is on title, positions, and that power to validate yourself. And number 5 is you must compete with other men. As I'm reading it, I'm saying it like this is what you guys should be doing. I'm like, I want to make sure and say these are the illusions of manhood. These are the illusions of manhood. And so what are the 5 masks of masculinity now?
Now the masks are actually the result of accepting the illusions.
Okay.
When we accept the illusions, then we start putting on these masks that we hide behind. So let's start with the first mask. The first mask of masculinity is the mask of Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah.
And I wore that mask for a very long time.
Big one there. Yeah, I'm glad it's number 1.
I wore that mask for a lot of years. Second mask is the mask of Mr. Tough Guy. And that's the guy that completely disconnects from his emotion, looks angry all the time, very defensive, won't allow you to see him for who he really is, and displays tough all the time. Third mask we wear is a mask we call what I call Mr. Gigolo, which is the guy, once again, who's trying to validate himself through sexual conquest. It's the guy who wears this mask that his sexual conquest makes him who he is. That's a mask. Another mask is the mask of what I call Mr. Moneybags. It's the man who hides behind his stuff. The guy who always wants to tell you about the new watch that he bought, or the new car, or the diamonds or whatever. He's so stuck in material things that's the only way he can relate, by sharing, talking about his stuff. And then the final mask is the mask, what I call, of Mr. Stuck in his head. And this is the man who is completely disconnected from his emotional self. He processes everything from the neck up, and he can't emotionally connect with anyone. So those are the 5 masks of masculinity that some men wear.
I feel like they're all very intertwined. They all kind of connect to each other, and they build off of each other in a way.
Yeah, and what you'll find, if you really take a moment and kind of think about them, we all wear a certain mask at different times, but there's always a strong suit that you really identify with. And so as you're listening to this, for the listeners, as they're listening to this, if they think about it, there will be one that will really stand out. And then you should be able to recognize the primary, what I'll call the primary mask that you may be wearing. And once again, as men, we generally have all worn those masks at one time or another.
Yeah. Yeah, and do you feel that these masks are used to help us get our needs met? And this is the way that we've taught ourselves.
Yeah, masks are simply defense mechanisms that we put on to try to protect ourselves. Usually the result of some unresolved emotional conflict that may have happened in childhood or throughout life through disappointment and pain. And they're basically defense strategies that we use to try to not get hurt again.
Yeah, to keep us safe.
Yep.
Okay, so we've gone over the 5 illusions of manhood and now the 5 masks of masculinity, and I think we can all identify with some of those masks more so than others. Now, I mentioned earlier, I wanted to have this conversation now, but why do you think this men's movement is happening now?
Well, if you really step back and look at it from, I'll call it a universal perspective. I believe, this is Michael Taylor's belief, that human consciousness is still evolving. And as human beings, we're evolving, and we're evolving through consciousness, which simply means we're becoming more aware. And so what I believe is happening is that men are waking up, which is just another way of saying becoming aware of who we really are as a species. And so all of the things that we've gone through up to this particular point as men is simply moving us towards something I believe that's pretty freaking awesome, which is coming to the understanding that we all have divine gifts and talent that we're given to make the world a better place. And so this evolution of consciousness, I believe, it's what's waking men up. It's just part of the human progression of evolution, that Men specifically have had certain roles throughout society for a very long time, but all of those roles are changing pretty rapidly. For example, in America, what a lot of people don't realize that for the first time in this country's history, there are actually more women in the workforce than men. This is something that's new. Not only that, there are also more women graduating from college than men. Well, if you think about it, there was a time in our history when women couldn't work and women weren't even allowed to go to school. Well, what happened? Well, I say evolution starts to change. Consciousness evolves, and what's happening as a species, human beings are now waking up to the idea that we're all the same. We all have certain gifts and talents, as I mentioned, and the key is for us individually to discover who we really are, what our gifts are, and how do we take our gifts, put them out into the world to make the world a better place. And so that's what I do. I have awakened to something in me, which I call my divine purpose. And that divine purpose is to empower men to live extraordinary lives. And I believe that that's something that's happening, and that's something that you can't stop.
Yeah. And on the college, I was doing research on this, and you're absolutely right. It was, I believe in 2002, it was for every one male, there was 1.3 women graduating college. And by the way, all 4 women graduating college. This is great, actually. But in 2018, they projected that it would be for every one male, it would be 1.8 females. So almost double. And we're almost there. It's almost 2016. So times are changing, and that is causing men to really ask questions.
Again, I don't think we have a choice, because once again, I personally believe that I believe in human evolution from the standpoint of awareness. And so if you really spend some time just kind of contemplating, I'm 54 years old. And in my short lifespan, which to me 54 years is just a blip, in eternity. But in my short lifespan, the changes that I've seen, not just in America, but around the world, is amazing. And I believe that awareness, our evolution, is actually speeding up in a good way. More and more people are simply are coming to the understanding that it's all about bringing humanity together. It's all about healing the planet to make it work for everybody. And so despite all the negative stuff we see throughout our media, I believe underneath that there's something really powerful and really positive going on. And I believe it's reason to get excited about the future.
Yeah, I like that. This is a really good conversation. And I want to take it deeper and go into the knowledge round, Michael. So are you ready for the knowledge round?
I'm ready.
All right. Is it worth $10 to get the woman of your dreams? Unveiled at last, a simple proven playbook to go from being a frustrated single man to having the woman of your dreams. A proven strategy so effective that I was scared to unveil this strategy to the world. When I discovered this strategy, I was initially scared to share it with the world. I didn't want to become a dating coach and really didn't want to have the stigma associated with that. However, I knew I had to write this book. I was frustrated with all the pain I saw inside men, stopping them from getting the woman of their dreams. I'd been there, and I wish I'd known this strategy earlier. This strategy will allow even the shyest of men to find and attract the woman of their dreams. You'll learn how to turn the number one barrier stopping men from chasing the women of their dreams, fear of rejection, into your ally. You'll completely eradicate approach anxiety from your psyche forever, and most importantly, you'll acquire the number one trait that women find most attractive, a man of purpose, the grounded man. Inside this book, you won't find any fluff or any filler. I packed this book full of actionable content to help any man get the woman of their dreams. Armed with this book and the desire to change your life, nothing will stop you from going from where you are now to where you want to be in your dating life and relationships. One word of warning. Go to knowledgeformen.com/playbook or simply go to Amazon and search for Dating Playbook for Men. Again, that's knowledgeformen.com/playbook or simply go to amazon.com and just search for Dating Playbook for Men. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. And the first question I have here, Michael, is what advice would you give to someone who's really feeling lost and unsure of what they should do with their lives?
Well, The first thing I would say is that you're not alone. I know for a very long time I played the isolation game thinking that no one would understand my challenges, no one would understand me, and there was really no reason to reach out for support because nobody would get me.
Yeah.
The truth is there are people out there who will love and support you if you're willing to take the risk to seek support. So the first thing I put out there is to not be afraid to seek support. There are people out there, there are services out there that can support you in beginning the process of rebuilding your life, no matter what challenge you may be going through.
Yeah, really good. And Michael, what was holding you back from becoming the man you are now today?
That's easy. Fear. I spent the majority of my young life terrified. Although I was successful, although I had accomplished some pretty amazing things, deep down inside, my entire life was driven by fear and shame. And so I had to be willing to look at all the things that scared me. For example, when I first started writing, one of my biggest fears was, well, who am I to write a book? I don't have, a college degree in writing, and I'm not an expert in anything, but I knew I wanted to write. I knew I wanted to share the lessons that I learned, and I had to get over the fear that I didn't have the quote-unquote credentials to be a writer. So I just stepped through that fear and started writing. I was afraid that when people read my books, they wouldn't like it. I was afraid that all of the stuff that I was putting out there may not make sense to people. But I went past that fear anyway, and I did it anyway. And now, some 4 books later, I'm changing people's lives around the world.
I like that. And speaking of books, what would you say are 3 of your most influential books that you've read and why?
First book that comes to mind is Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh.
Okay.
Literally changed my life, changed my perception of God, the universe, spirituality. Really, really helped me a lot. I'm also a huge, huge fan of King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, which was by Moore and Gillette. I think every man, that should be required reading for men who are on this path of transforming masculinity. King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And last but not least, I'm a huge fan of Wayne Dyer, who unfortunately recently passed away. And
is that right? I was not aware of that.
Yeah, Wayne Dyer, just a couple of days ago, passed away.
Wow.
Heart attack.
Wow.
And he wrote a book. One of his first books was called Your Erroneous Zones. And that was the book that got me involved in personal development when I was in my 20s. And it literally changed my perception of reality and who I am as a human being. And he said one thing that really stood out in that book. And what he said was, as a human being, you have within you the capacity to do anything any other human being has done. As a matter of fact, if it hasn't been done, you can be the first. And that book really, really changed my life and helped me see that I have an unlimited capacity to create anything my heart desires.
Yeah. Yeah. And for all the listeners here, if you haven't heard of Wayne Dyer, go to Amazon, type in Wayne Dyer, and get some of his work. Highly recommend it. He has a plethora of books, and just find a title, find one that looks good to you. And coming back to the interview here, Michael, imagine you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self. What would you tell him to do, and what would you tell him not to do?
Well, the first thing I tell him not to do is worry about what other people think.
Yeah.
Stop worrying about what other people think. And what I would tell him to do is to trust his heart, follow his instincts, and know that he has the capacity to do anything he sets his mind to.
Yeah, very powerful. And so moving on here, and even if you have to summarize some of your main points, what would you say is your philosophy on life and success?
I guess my philosophy is simple, is that life was meant to be good.
Yeah.
Life is meant to be good. And when it's not good, it's because of something we're doing. It's not something that life is doing to us. And so when we take full responsibility for that, then we can create a life, any type of life that we want.
Yeah, simple and to the point. It's what we need to hear. It's good. So, all right, that concludes the knowledge round there, Mike. Good stuff. Good knowledge round. What's exciting you today now? Like, what's the projects? What's going on in your world?
Well, I'm finishing up my next book, which is called Adversity is Your Greatest Ally: How to Use Life Challenges to Live the Life of Your Dreams. And it's a step-by-step guide to help people recognize that adversity is not necessarily a bad thing. As a matter of fact, I believe adversity is mandatory for success. We all have to go through challenges to become who we really are. So I'm really looking forward to putting this out there to inspire people, to let them know that anything really is possible. Pretty psyched up about the new book coming out. And I'm also working on a new project that I'm really passionate about, which is trying to get more men of color involved in men's work. I believe that's a segment of society that nobody's really addressing. And so I've created a program specifically designed or targeted to men of color to engage them in this process. And my last book, which was called Black Men Rock, 10 Keys to Empower Black Men to Live Extraordinary Lives, I'm actually shooting a video series for that new resource that I'm putting together for men of color. So I'm really, really excited about that.
All right. You're doing incredible work, and I'm excited for the next book you have on adversity. I think that is a massive just epiphany and key to success in all aspects of life. And I respect the work that you're doing too, with expanding men's work to all different cultures. So this is really good, and I'm excited to have had you here on the show. For all the listeners, you can follow up with Michael Taylor. Just simply go to coachmichaeltaylor.com, or just go into Google and type in Michael Taylor, and his book on Conversations with Men pops right up. So. Michael, I'm honored to have you here on the show, and I look forward to having you back on again in the future.
Well, Andrew, let me do a shout out for you real quick, because I am just really proud of the work that you're doing. I watched your little movie, absolutely loved it. You're doing some wonderful work in the world. So again, I want to acknowledge you for the contribution you're making in men's work. So thank you for you.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and 1 million downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we've just started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a review in iTunes. It really helps to grow the podcast. Guys, 2015 is the official year of living with purpose, where every day you do only the things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. Check out kfmfree.com to get free tools I've created to help you crush life. Again, that's kfmfree.com. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, and I'll see you in the next episode.